Hi, I'm Dave Chaplin from IR35 Shield. I'm here again with Crawford Temple from Professional Passport. Welcome again to the Compliance Files. Crawford, today we're going to talk about PEO. This is a new model that's been on the market for quite a while. What's PEO mean? What's it all about?
Okay, professional employment organisation. The term really originated from the States, where they operate it, but the models operated in the UK haven't yet become as sophisticated as they are in the States. Effectively, a PEO is an umbrella company, but rather than be on the uplifted rate that we've spoken about, the worker is told what the rate they're going to be paid is. So let's say the worker's told you're on £15, £20 an hour.
Yeah.
When they get their payslip through, they will get £15 or £20 per hour for each hour they've worked.
Yeah.
And it removes all the confusion and complexity, the usual thing where a contract says, why am I paying the employer's NI? Not understanding the legal contractual aspects.
Yeah.
So it removes all of that. And then basically what happens is that the provider who's operating the PEO invoices the recruitment company for all the costs of employment that are associated with that, including holiday pay and everything else.
Okay.
And it's given on top by the recruitment company.
It sounds like just sort of the way. Well, it sounds very similar to agency payroll. Essentially, it's like when we all did a bit of temp work. When we were kids.
The difference is that with agency payroll, the agency would be employing engaging the contractor. And they would be running the payroll. So one of the ways that they could do it would be outsourcing that to a payroll type bureau facility to make those calculations. But what happens is the agencies then pick up all the employment costs, like the statutory sick pay, if there's tribunals, right? So they're holding all of those risks.
Oh, okay.
Under the PEO, because it's the provider that is employing the worker, then they're holding all of those risks and costs associated with them. So things like sick pay now can't be reclaimed, so it's a pure cost of the business where it happens.
Oh, I see. So in a way, it's sort of it splits up the responsibilities between the agency and the PEO. So the recruitment agency can just get on with what it knows how to do, which is put bums on seats, I guess, and get people into engagements. And PEO does all the pay slips and tax.
And the agency knows they can define what their costs are going to be, and they haven't got any of these unexpected costs like statutory sick pay or other things that come along, because they can just define it based on what the tax bands are and know that's what they're getting paid for.
So when an agency is advertising a rate, if they're saying, would they say, some of them say, and we only do umbrella only, will they be saying this is an umbrella PEO? I mean, what will they? No, will they just say it's a PAYE rate?
Yeah, it's more likely to be advertised as a PAYE rate for a PEO. And then where a contractor gets engaged with an agency that's running a PEO, it's likely the agency will make clear the basis of this. Where the confusion around the umbrella is because it's often the rate is defined as an uplifted or a limited company rate or an umbrella rate. And there's so many different terms used that people don't really understand. Or in some cases, it's just called your rate. The agency says to the contractor, your rate for this assignment is this, without that understanding. Whereas generally when they can tell you specifically how much you will get paid for each hour as your net, your gross taxable pay, then that's normally made very clear to them.
Yeah, that does seem a bit more transparent. So we could be in a situation where you could have two agencies, they're both trying to fill a particular engagement with the same client. One of them wants the contractor to work through a more traditional umbrella.
Yep.
And one of them wants to work to a PEO, but on the face of it, if the contractor doesn't understand the differences between the rates, one rate might look higher than the other rate, even though you could end up not earning as much.
We've seen situations in the market where the same role is marketed across a number of recruitment companies, and we've seen where the contractor chases the higher rate, that actually results in them taking home less money, because the higher rate versus the PAYE rate from another agency hadn't been uplifted enough, and
Yeah.
and that's often where the umbrellas get bad press, because
Yeah,
the worker, an umbrella can only work with the rate that they sign up with the agency.
Absolutely.
And they won't be aware that this worker had the option of taking it on a different rate, and that's where you often get this conflict going on.
Yeah. I mean, to solve that, and when we talked about this in one of the other discussions, there's the key information document. So we should.
Excuse me.
So we talked about this in one of the other discussions with the key information document. So hopefully now we are at a point where, crikey, I mean, the contractor's been told this is the rate. They're then given a key information document. They're then given a pay illustration from the umbrella or PEO. I mean, they're at the point now where it's going to be very difficult for them to say, well, I didn't really know what was going on. And if they did, well, I'm sorry, but you should have sort of read the paperwork, right?
Yeah, it should be very clear. The moment they start talking to the provider, it will be very clear what they're getting because of the pay illustration. We did a session before on pay slips.
That's right,
And with the PEO, you won't get the reconciliation statement that we were talking about in the pay slip. You will just get a pay slip.
One, right?
Because there's no need for one, because you're clear that you're getting £15 for each hour you work, so that you don't need to see all the employment costs and everything that were associated with that.
And with the PEO, which does seem a much simpler solution, and I think, some of the things I've written on Contractor Calculator, and we've talked about, is I quite prefer PEO because the calculation itself aligns more with how deemed payments and things are done and how the payment is treated under the new legislation. Whereas under the old IR35 legislation, a traditional umbrella calculation sort of aligns with that. So I'm quite a fan of PEO. For its simplicity, so does it, what about expenses? Can you still claim expenses if you're in a PEO?
On rare occasions, there may be some agency reimbursed expenses, but generally a PEO model at the marketplace it's aimed at, because if you think about it, with an uplifted rate, there's flexibility in what the employment cost may be or anything else. And therefore you need the rate that you could take a worker on is much higher to make sure that worker would always be paid national minimum wage. Where PEO benefits is if you've got a worker that's going to be on very close to national minimum wage, then you can set that rate, and because that's the PAYE rate, the worker will always be paid correctly in line with national minimum wage, rather than all this flexibility around it. So it tends to be, for certain markets and certain sectors that aren't necessarily higher paid, which is good, because trying to understand the complexity of the uplifted rate for some people is just, they can't get their heads around it. It's just too much, which I understand. If you're not living in that world, if you don't live in the tax world, you wouldn't get it. I understand why all that confusion would arise.
Yeah, totally.
So it tends to be at that in certain sectors and at certain levels of rates. Which makes it clear and concise. Okay,
so to summarise then on PEO, new type of model, can sort of be called an umbrella, but it's a new thing. The rate that's advertised is the rate you get paid. There's no sort of statement or anything. It's just a pay slip. And it's just the same as maybe if someone's doing temp work through an agency type thing. Exactly the same as that. Very simple. Typically,
the reason you'll know it's a PEO is because you will be employed by a different company to the recruitment company.
Great.
So you'll have a different employer. They'll introduce you to one or a number that they're prepared to work with. So you'll suddenly be introduced to someone that's got a completely different name to the agency, and they're going to be your employer. And that's how you would differentiate between PEO and agency PAYE, because on agency PAYE, it will be the agency that gives you the contract.
Okay, great. That's cleared up what a PEO is. I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any comments or further questions about PEO, then please add them in the comments below the video, and we'll cover them in a future discussion of the compliance files.